a famous quote from an American football coach. I'm probably going to say it wrong, so let me think for a second. I think it's success happens when preparation meets opportunity. And the way I like to say it to players is, especially when I do like a lot of my mentoring and the mental training stuff, you must learn to be that elite performer now. It's not like you're given the chance and then someday when you're given that chance, you all of a sudden become an elite performer. Once you get that chance, they expect you to already be that performer. And so the way I sort of say to players is, if you were offered like a dream opportunity, let's say a dream opportunity for everyone on here is a trial with a professional club, a trial with an A-League club, maybe a trial with a European club, maybe a trial with Man United. Sorry if anyone, City fans or Liverpool fans, I chose Man United, right? They're on flames at the moment, so we went Man United. But let's say Man United offered you a trial tomorrow. I say, well, would you be ready? And I'm not talking about to try out for their under 14s or the 15s or the 16s. I'm talking about, would you be able to try out and play for the first team? The answer is probably no, right? If you're on this Zoom call with me right now. But what if they came to you and said, okay, in 100 days time, we're going to give you a trial. And what would you do in that 100 days? Right? You train like mental every single day. You'd probably scrap everything in your life and train every single day, all day, every day. I'm not saying scrap going to school and stuff like that, but you know what I mean? Like everything else would seem far less important. And it would be, once I'm done with my food, I've got to go get more touches, preparing for that day. Now, footballers prepare for an opportunity with no date. So what if it got to that 100 days and the coach said, you know what, we might look at you again. It's not going to be today. I can't tell you when it's going to be, but maybe someday. Well, then what would you do? You would have to have the same attitude that you did for that 100 days, always. And the players that are that take their opportunity, they have been preparing long before that opportunity comes, so that they're able to perform when it does. Yeah, so I'm not from a footballing family. My old man would watch games. We'd watch games together when I was younger. There was not a lot available on TV, but I really loved playing the game. So under 13s was the first time I ever played in a strong competitive team. Before that, I'd played, like community football and mixed teams where maybe I was one of the standout players, and I had a few players in my team that had never really played before. So that in itself, I feel, was really good for me because it forced me to be a leader and to take control of, games and to take control of the season and the team and stuff like that. So I learned a lot of leadership through that. But then through friends at school, I discovered that there's a world out there of very, very good footballers. And if you want to have a crack at it someday, you got to be around them as much as you can. So went and tried out for clubs, and I actually played for Apia, for Leichhardt Tigers in Sydney's inner west, from the age of 13 to 16. Under 13s was a big eye-opening season for me because I went from that sort of community team to a very, very, very competitive and a tough environment. I loved it. I never felt out of place, but it was a big step up. And I sat on the bench almost every game in under 13s, and we weren't in the top tier either. So it was the second tier. We were the best team in that sort of second tier, and our club went up in club championship promotion. But I remember being under 13, an under 13 player, and I'd play in most games, 20 minutes here and there. But there was a few games where I didn't get on at all. And those really hurt as a 12, 13-year-old to be obsessed with playing and to not get on the field. But I had this drive to get up to the standard of the players that was in my group, that were in my group. And over the next 3 or 4 years, it became about making sure that I was going to do absolutely everything within my power to catch up and then go past them. And that 1 year, that under 13 period where I really had to fight for game time, it helped shape my entire mindset for my whole career. Because it wasn't a 1 week thing where I'm going to prove myself and get in the team this week. It was 12 months of I need to get on the field. And so it really ingrained this attitude within me that this isn't going to happen in a week or a month. This is going to be now like who you are for the next, whatever it is, year or two. At the end of this year, I got to get back in this team again. And I had to try out every year. Every year I had to try out for the same team. I was never a shoo-in. By the time I was 15, still at the same team, I'd become, a regular starter, playing in midfield and helping lead the team. We weren't a standout team. We were a mid-table team, playing against some good players, some very good players. I played we were in the first division for our age group, by that stage. Fantastic players. Brett Holman, he was one of the best from my age group, that I played against. But there were dozens of others, dozens of very, very good players, very promising. And a sad part about it is I feel like perhaps whoever was coaching some of these players, or just the people surrounding them, maybe gave them a little bit too much praise. Maybe I didn't know some of them, but I did know a lot of them. They knew they were the best, and they were told that they were the best, and that they were told that they were going to go into big things. And I think that really hurt a lot of these players' chances, because once we got to the age of 16, 17, and some of these players were caught up, and they didn't have that same grit and that same desire, that players like me had to develop, because we had to try and catch up. A lot of the best players, and it's sad when I look back at some of the potential of these players. But so that was me from 13 to 16. Was just a day in, day out, hunger and desire to prove to everyone around me that I belonged, and that I was gonna stick it out longer than everyone else. I remember wanting to know what the pathway was to sort of become a pro, and because of my limited exposure to players at a high level, players like Harry Kuehl, who at 19 years old was lighting up the national team. The national team was everything, because I didn't have a lot of I couldn't watch a lot of football on TV, though. I didn't have access to La Liga and Premier League and the French League and Bundesliga. It wasn't like that. So the networks always made a big deal out of the Socceroos, and they were the heroes, and that was who I wanted to be, and that was my generation. That's who everyone wanted to be. They wanted to be Socceroos. I knew Harry Kuehl had gone to a sports high school in Sydney before he went overseas, and so in my head I thought, well, if that's what he did, then I need to try and do the same thing. I need to, I was trying to find that, where's the template, where's the stepping stones that other players have followed that I need to follow also. I had no clue how to contact or arrange something with a sports high school to try and get looked at. So instead, I spoke to people and found out, well, what are they doing day in, day out? And if I can't be there, then at least I can do it on my own. And I find out what their day-to-day was. And maybe they were doing a session most mornings, or finishing the day early for school and doing sessions, and I had a look at what my training schedule was like. And I was maybe 14 years old, 14, 15 maybe, where I was really trying to prove myself to that team like I was talking about. And I was only training, 2-3 days a week, structured training. I was on the ball every day. But in terms of working hard and with intensity, then I realized, okay, if I'm not there and this is how much they're working, then every day I'm not doing what they are, I fall behind. So that was I'd never met anyone in those schools. I never seen any of them train. But in my mind, I had a vision of what they were doing every day, and so I had to do the same. So I would get up at around, it wasn't always consistent, but 5:30 in the morning, 5:45, and I would grab a ball. And I grew up near Sydney Olympic Park, not too far, about 20-30 minute run from there. And I would go and I would take the ball at 6 a.m. and run with the ball, and weave in and out of trees and weave in and out of poles and bike riders and all that kind of stuff, and just really be in that determined, that clear mental space where it was just me and my dream and nothing else. And I had a lot of a lot of examples of boxers. I never followed boxing in my life, right? But you always see boxers in boxing movies going for runs by themselves, or they show up somewhere and they go for a run on the beach, or Rocky running up steps. So that's what I felt like. I felt like I was training to become a champion. So I never actually thought about it like this, but I remember always thinking that, every time I run up steps, I would picture myself like being Rocky, becoming champion. I hadn't even watched the movie, but I'd just seen the famous scene, So, and I'd run all the way to the Sydney Olympic Stadium that they were building, where the Olympics were going to be held. And I'd run around that, and I'd picture myself playing in that. And if for anyone that's been there, there's hundreds of, steel tree-like things, like a little steel forest. And I'd weave in and out of there as fast as I could with the ball and try and get through as quick as I could. And again, it was for no one else. It was not to tell my coach that I'd done it. It was this fulfilling this like itch that I had to get better every day. I'd run home, I'd shower, and I'd go to school. And then, and if I didn't do that, the alternative was I'd get on a train at 6 a.m. and go to school. And they said I could train on the back ovals by myself. That opened the change room for me. So I'd go and do an hour by myself on the field, and then go have a shower, and then start school that way. And then that was my extra on top of whatever I do for school or club. When I became a professional with Sydney FC, I very much had this. I was always like team player and tried to lead, but I still had a bit of this self-centered mentality going into Sydney FC. I got in a lot of fights and arguments with people in that team my first year, but it was more. I was quite nervous when I was around a lot of those guys, because it was a team filled with stars, and so I think puffing up my chest and not backing down from anything was my way of saying I'm not disappearing. Like I belong here now. So if you want to kick me, I'm gonna kick you back, and let's go. And so the first year, at times it was uncomfortable, even though there was never any hostility between teammates. There's some people that are still very good friends with me now from that group. But it was mentally a big step for me to go from a state league player into an A-League player, and then after a year or two, really embrace what it meant to be part of a professional team, and to trust the people in that group. And I wrote an article recently about Stevie Corica, Sydney FC's captain, about my debut for Sydney FC, where we got a free kick, 20 odd yards out, middle of the goal. There was a footage of it in that little video, but there was, like I said, it was a team full of stars, and I ran up to the ball, expecting Corica to want to take it, but I was sort of saying to him, "You want it? I want it. If you don't want it, do you want it?" And he handed me the ball, and he was like, "Oh, kid, show everyone what you can do." And I was like, "Man, this guy's a legend in the A-League history, right?" And he was wearing number 10, playing for the Bling FC, they used to be called, because they were the big club of the league. And he handed me the ball on my debut and said, "Go for it, man. I got you back here." And so I really realized that was my first game. So I realized throughout the following months that if we want to win stuff, we got to trust each other, and it's not about any individual. As my career went on, it became when I got to the Wanderers, the level of tactical preparation and structure within the team was different. It was very different. And so my role when I played with the Wanderers was less about trying to beat players 1v1 and create things. It was touch, play, be in the right spot, touch, play, organize, touch, play. And I actually really enjoyed that. And because it felt it's better to play football as a team. It really is like far more enjoyable that way, to achieve things as a group than your team to struggle, but you have 3 or 4 good moments that you can reflect on and say, "Yeah, I look pretty good though when I beat that player." When you're part of a team that can dominate games and dominate seasons, that was a pretty special experience. I played wherever I was told, because like I said, it was a little bit different. No disrespect to any of the players on here, because I don't know any of you, but I feel like players are allowed to be a little more precious these days, which is not an entirely a bad thing. It's important to look after players mentally, because back in the day, a lot of players would be broken mentally. but essentially I would play wherever I was told. That was usually as a right midfielder. They would call it a lot because it wasn't a high out and out right winger. It was almost always in a 4-4-2 flat midfield. As I got a bit older, I played as a central midfielder. When I bounced around clubs, I played as a central midfielder a lot. And then because I had been practicing for years and years and years, different dribbling techniques and different ways to beat players, as I got into my late teens, and that became a real strength of mine, it made a lot more sense for me to go out wide because the amount of high quality central midfielders in my age group that I came across, I really felt that it was going to be more likely for me to get a chance as a wide player than it was to maybe get a chance as a central player. I think I would have loved having a career as a player playing more inside, but I felt my strengths suited out wide a lot more. I loved working hard and I loved running, which was super important in those positions, which some players that I grew up with would be sickened by me saying how much I enjoyed that part of it. But it wasn't that I enjoyed the action of running. I enjoyed the competitive side of it, where if we're doing a running drill, a training, and I can leave 17 of these guys behind, I want them to all feel weaker than me. I want them to all feel like that, that bugger up there, like he's making us look bad. Like I enjoyed that feeling. I enjoyed them going home feeling like they were behind me.
Yeah, that's super. And again, comes down to that sort of you versus yourself kind of mentality. And it's also interesting there. You talk about the different positions. Certainly something we do a lot through the TSP is challenge players with different formations, different positions, different roles that maybe they're not always getting within their club. So that's kind of that's really, really good to hear. Why was it that you were able to play 4 different positions throughout a successful Asian Champions League campaign? Play a different position for the Socceroos than you do in your club. What were those skills that let you do that?
I think being two-footed was like an obvious one. On the surface, I give my mum a bit of credit. She told me, like, when you're learning something, she didn't know football, but she said if you learn it with your good foot, she wasn't impressed until I could show her with my weak foot. And that just came from dancing. She'd just done a bit of dancing and ballet when she was younger, and obviously in that kind of discipline, they're very balanced, and you never just learn something with one foot. You learn all techniques, for both sides of the body. So that was it was almost just like a fun game between her and I, that I'd show her something and she wouldn't be impressed unless I could do it with my weak foot. So, but it put the idea in my head to constantly get better at it. There are things I think that I've heard Jesus, another former pro that I played with at one point, we always used to have this discussion about you don't need, he'd say you don't need 2 feet for most things, which I don't disagree with, because I guess if you're going one-on-one with a player, you don't have time to think, maybe I should use my weak foot. You do whatever you need to do to beat the player. But there are some things that you must be very good at with both feet: your first touch, your passing, your finishing, even your defending, because you must face both ways at different times during the game. So doesn't mean you have to approach the player with alternating feet. I did, but it was because after years and years of practice, it felt natural. Being on the right hand side, it felt natural to go with the left. Sometimes being on the left, it felt natural to go with the right. So that's sort of the obvious one, because getting half a yard and delivering a good ball from either side of the field was another thing that I felt could help me stand out. It's definitely something that got me my first A-League contract, because John Cosmina, the Sydney FC coach, was looking for one more player, but I think in his mind he needed to fill a couple more positions. So if that makes sense, he wanted a little more cover in a couple of positions. So having someone that could play both sides. So there was that. The tactical side of it, I was always like a strong competitor, right? Like anyone that gets at that level, you got to be a ruthless competitor. But that's where the sort of defensive side came. So if I was pressing as a high player, I think a lot of it came down to that pride, and almost, I don't think arrogance is the right word, but that, I spoke about the wanting to run past people or run and leave people behind in training sessions just to show that I could do it over them. That's where a lot of that desire came to work hard in defense. Fullbacks have a very difficult job. It's such a physically demanding job. Quite often as a fullback, at least throughout my career, if you're receiving the ball in build-up, you're usually the plan to get pressed. So anytime the ball was getting played from a centre back to you, the other team's trap was triggered, and you'd receive all the pressure. So tactically, as I got a little older, working with Tony Popovich for such a long time in my career, that helped me feel very comfortable in any position. Because when you play for, I could say a coach like him, but I guess I could say when you play for him in particular, you learn everyone's job, whether you have to play it or not. It's just your knowledge of the game is just a byproduct of knowing the structure of the team. When I was young, as a teenager, I got really into experimenting with different mental training techniques, and being able to break down my job, whether it be as a fullback or as a winger, but understanding, well, what are the most common moments I encounter as a winger? And I mean, for any kids that might be listening here, quite often you're going to either be receiving the ball wide, maybe facing the player, or you're going to be receiving the ball with your back to goal and getting pressed, and then maybe you're receiving the ball running in behind. So there's obviously a million variations, but those are three pretty clear moments that are going to happen every single game when you have the ball. So I was able to break down, okay, what do I need to get good at to be a winger? What do I need to get good at to be a fullback? I'd look at the moments that you might receive the ball as a fullback, and it's usually high and wide. Obviously today we play with tucked in fullback. Sometimes there's different ways to do it. But yeah, as my career went on, and the more I learned tactically, it's why I love coaching so much. I was always interested in all positions. I mean, throughout, like playing in low levels, I had runs here and there where I'd play as a centre back. I played as a 9 or a false 9 at times, and played in the centre as well. And I enjoyed all of them. It's one reason I enjoy coaching so much now. It was tough. I mean, and I don't know that I ever took one for my club team from 13 to 16. I don't know that I ever took one. I played with my school team where I was, one of the standout players. So me and a couple of the others would have a couple of arguments over the ball, and then you get to take every third one. And then when you score a couple, you're able to say, hey, I scored the last one. Come on, give me the ball. It's not easy. It's actually a really uncomfortable part of a team is arguing over the dead ball. For me, it was like an art. It was like a really fun. It was a therapeutic thing where, I mean, I remember going down to a couple of quick stories about free kicks for you. On Christmas Eve, I grew up in a family that we'd go to church on Christmas Eve, and we'd have Christmas Eve dinner together. And I just disappeared out the door and said, "Mum, I'll see you later. I'll be back in a bit." And I took a bag of balls and walked off in the afternoon. Didn't even think, but I had a bunch of wheelie bins. There was a goal that was put aside because it was Christmas time, but it was up against a big warehouse concrete wall. So I'd set the wheelie bins up. I'd prop the lids open with whatever garbage I could find, and I'd put 2 or 3 wheelie bins with some cardboard holding them up so they'd be a bit taller, closer to head height. And I'd warm up with some tricks and some juggling and stuff like that, running through trees. There was loads of trees, so I'd zigzag, and then once I felt warm, I'd start setting the ball up, and I'd put scenarios in my head, and I'd be like, okay, it's 1-1, 91st minute. We've got a win to go on, and I'd put all these scenarios in my head. And that was one of my favorite parts of training. Like I'd always do it with my brother and my best mate. We'd say, okay, you're down 2-1, last minute. If you lose this game, you're out, you're done. And so you'd put a bit of pressure. And I learned to love that pressure, like really, like it was so addictive, because when you hit one, even at the park when there's wheelie bins there, like I'd celebrate like it was the real deal, And the truth is, like those moments for the kids watching at home that dream, like, oh, what is it like to play at the top? When you score a free kick in front of 20, 30,000 people to win the game in the last few minutes, it's the same feeling as when I was whipping them over the wheelie bins. It's actually like the same feeling, like the same rush. Of course, the stakes are higher and the hype after them is different. but the actual feeling in that moment, I guess it's just chemicals in our brain, right? It's the same. So, but anyway, on this particular day, on Christmas Eve, sunset came and went, and I was there in the dark. It was just enough moonlight to keep going. And then these headlights flashed down across the field, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? And I heard my mum's voice, Shannon, from behind the headlights. And I was like, well, it's okay. I'm just here hitting free kicks. And she was like, you've been here for 4.5 hours. We didn't know where you were. And so 4.5 hours, and I'd missed church, and I'd missed dinner, but I scored some good free kicks. So there was that. And I remember out in the street with my brother, we'd always be out like hitting shots and trying to recreate our favorite goals that we'd seen, on TV. And at the time I was learning this time I was a bit older in my teens, and I was learning how to knuckle a ball for free kicks. And I definitely hadn't mastered it. It's not an easy thing to master, I don't know that I scored some good ones throughout the NPL, but never got to show it off much in the A-League. But someone sometimes would park a car in front of the hedge that we used as a goal, and it frustrated me no end. Like they were allowed to park there, but it was so annoying. And one day I was so excited to go out and hit shots and free kicks at this hedge from across the street, and there was a car parked there, and it was a nice car, and I was so upset. And I said, I don't care. Jumping goal to my brother. And I lined up to hit this knuckleball straight over the car. And I needed to get it up over the car and down in time to hit the hedge, because if it went over the hedge, it would smash into my house. And I drilled this one, and it went about 12 inches over the car and dropped under the hedge. And my brother still says now, he was like, that's when I knew you were going to be a player, because pressure excited you more than it worried you, Yeah, I think I mean, understanding what mental training means. I think a lot of players wouldn't even know what that means. What is mental training, and how does it impact me? There's different ways. So you can set goals, and learning how to set the right kind of goals, goals to motivate you. The bigger goals, the long-term goals to really make you hungry to get up every day and work hard. But the more specific goals sort of allow you to be more focused on what you're going to do each day. And that comes down to understanding your role, which we spoke about earlier. What does a good performance look like for me? If I had an outstanding performance, what would it look like in my position? It would probably be a lot of great first touches under pressure, pass and move, create half a yard. And, you have to understand what your role is. But then once you do, there are ways that elite athletes use mental training to get an edge over everyone else, or to become more consistent performers. So one way is through visualization, often called mental imagery or mental rehearsal. They all have slightly different definitions, but they're very, very similar. But that's basically imagining yourself performing all of your moments at an optimal level. And so that comes down to a bit of daydreaming, picturing yourself scoring great goals and stuff like that. But you can also get really specific with it and break down your game into those moments, and then spend a little bit of time each day taking some deep breaths, clearing your mind, and going through those moments. There's a lot of studies that show that the mind cannot necessarily differentiate between what is real and what is imagined, which is why when you have a nightmare, you wake up with your heart pounding and you're sweating. That's why when someone else cops a ball in the groin, you flinch for a second, because your mind's worried that it's happening to you. So we can sort of, a lot of it comes down to what I do when I do all the mental training with academies and groups, whether that be a larger group or with a small group in a sort of private mentoring sessions. I help them understand that what happens in our brain when we practice something. So when you're out on the field and the game happens too quick, you don't have a lot of time to think. You don't actually have a lot of time to make decisions. What we have to do most of the time is to not think and just play, and to just trust your habits and to trust your instincts. But if you don't have positive habits and you don't have the positive instincts built in, then bad habits come out and poor decisions come out. So you can almost program your brain to identify moments that you encounter a lot and sort of hardwire the ideal outcome of those moments. And that could be like a real an easy example for the players might be if you're in a 2v1 situation. Now, barring a center back, although you might, be picking off a striker or something like that, but most players on the field might experience a 2v1 situation. All right. They all look a little different. The distancing is a little different. The angle of the defender might be different, but essentially a 2v1 situation can almost always be approached in the same way. Carry the ball at the defender, commit the defender, release the free player. All right. So this is one like real clear moment where a player could picture themselves in their position in this kind of moment and just repeat a few times in their head, 2v1, drive at my player, play the free player, drive at the man, play the free player. And then all of a sudden the habit, I won't go too much into the brain, but that habit is built like a little pathway, like a bridge. And the thicker that bridge is, the quicker that habit comes out under pressure. So if you've never practiced it, it's thin like a string. If you've practiced it a lot, the brain recognizes I've got to do this habit a lot. So if you practice it on the field or you practice it in your mind, your brain, it makes that bridge thicker. So it can perform that habit much faster. It can identify that moment quicker. What am I in? 2v1 drive pass. And it happens without thought. And the best players will all tell you that they play in, it's a popular topic of conversation in this flow state or in the zone is a really, the popular way to describe it. Getting in the zone for the players, that means being able to step onto a field and think nothing, just be free, just exist there in the moment. If the ball is bouncing, play the bouncing ball. If you're one-on-one with the keeper, play that moment. Don't think, don't overanalyze, just play what you see, play what you feel. To get really good at that, you also need to get really good at those habits. And that comes through training by yourself, that comes through training by your team. And what I'm trying to put into play is that can also come with training a few minutes a day. It's not a lot, a few minutes a day at home in your own head.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's actually one of the kids just asked a bit earlier whether what your thoughts are or our thoughts are on the fact that, a lot of these have had a couple of seasons now interrupted by COVID. And is that going to negatively impact their chance of achieving their dream of, playing internationally or becoming a national team player? I mean, I've got my thoughts on it, and it probably ties in maybe to a lot about what you've been saying about the extras. But what are your thoughts first and foremost?
I mean, the positive is definitely a controversial word, but the positive is that it's happened to the whole world. So, everyone in this generation has faced a challenge that I never had to face. I'm very sympathetic to what the players have had to go through, even to my friends that are had significant time in their professional careers taken away. That sucks. That's not good. It's horrible. I think going through this period will build a ton of resilience. For kids that don't know what resilience means, it means being able to bounce back. So often in our society, we get everything we want when we want, and everything comes easy. And that's not making any sort of judgment on any families or individuals. It's just our society. We live in the real top % of the world's population, where we're not. A lot of us don't go without food and shelter and that kind of stuff. So life is comfortable. So being made to be uncomfortable for a year and a half, I think it's going to make all you guys stronger. As long as the dream, as long as the long-term vision stays as your focus, you'll learn to grow from this.
Yeah, I think another one, Shannon, is also like because kind of structured training's kind of been taken away a lot. A lot of everyone's still probably got access to ball, wall, something to dribble around, ability to visualize where they're trying to get to. And I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that you would probably attribute most of becoming the player you became to what you did for yourself. And there was obviously team coaches and things along the way, but a lot of it was every person who was playing in your youth teams was playing in your youth teams, getting the same training. You made it because you do the extra. So there's probably something in that for everybody on here. And we've been saying it for the last few weeks, like take control of it. Yes, it's going to be a little bit more, it's going to be trickier. And like you say, like it's not to, you know, it is tricky. It's tricky for everyone, but there are still ways around it if they really, you know, keep fighting for it, I guess.
Absolutely. So, and I, you know, like I already spoke about how I would always compare, well, what is everyone else doing? I've got to do the same or more. My high school coach, you know, my high school was not a powerhouse in football by any means, but still very close with my coach, just a really good human being. And he gave us this amazing advice. He was talking about us as a team, but one of our goals was to write our own story, to not be like the teams that had come before us. And I took that personally. You know, it was not, of course, we applied it to the team, but for me, it then became about, I'm going to focus on Shannon Cole's journey and my story. And if that means I don't make it till I'm early 20s, then so be it. That's my story. I saw players getting opportunities at 16, 17, going to Europe, and I thought that's fine, good for them. That's not my story, but my chance is going to come. And I had very good players as friends that sort of stopped playing 16, 17, 18 because they weren't the ones that were going to Europe and they weren't getting those opportunities. And they just didn't have the ability to focus on the possibilities for their own journey. 100% my football career was solely down to me discovering how to be strong mentally and how to grow from every sort of challenge and seek out the pressure opportunities and things like that.